Hello, everybody. This is Chris from Felgar Productions, and we're back for part two of my review of the Pendraken TB line Middle Ages, specifically looking at the Islamic side, although not 100% of this is Pendraken, and not all of the Pendraken are from the TB line, but we're going to be focusing on TB, and I'll talk about some of the other stuff. So this is the other half of the army that is going to feature in the 1189 Battle of Acre. That's going to be at Historicon 2024, as well as some future other games like Hattin. And the you can call them Islamic, Saracen. In this particular time period under Saladin, it's the Ayyubids. They are going to be a primarily mounted army, and thus you can see a significant amount of this army, the majority of it, is on horse. So looking at the Islamics, the first thing I'm going to point out is the light cavalry with bow. There's the first line up here, and these are another one of the TB two-part figures. And the join, it's I will say, once you glue them, prime them, paint them, you're not really going to see it. But it's at the waist of the figure, whereas the heavier figures, these knights, the whole torso and legs are separate from the horse, so you glue them on. The legs are sculpted as part of the horse, and the torso is separate. So you can kind of twist them, although really, if you twist them so that they're facing on the, I guess, the right side of the horse, it looks like their spine is, not right. So there's really only one correct way to do them, although I have them, some of them facing mostly forward, some of them a little more closer to 90 degrees. These paint up great. They've got a variety of different hat and helmet styles. These are kind of the fur caps, which really should be kind of an off-white, although I've made these color-coded so you can tell these are the light blue guys. These are my green units so that I can differentiate them on the battlefield, and their shields match as well. And they do all have these shields, and those are sculpted directly onto the horse, because these figures in the Crusades were meant to be horse archers, but also be able to get in to close combat. So that's the light cavalry with bow. It also comes in a light camelry with bow and spear option that I do not have, but that is on there. I believe it is pretty much the exact same upper torsos. It's just camel bodies, and there's three poses of those, one of which has a spear and the other two have bow and arrows. Following up that is then the heavy knights with lances, which you can see here, and they are what they say they are. They're heavy knights with lances. Some of these knights have mail, some of them have cloth. These flags, I did not print these. These are from Pendraken. They do not specifically have Middle Ages ones. These are from their 16th century Ottoman Turk line, but as a kind of generic Islamic things, I do not read or speak Arabic. That might be specific to Ottomans, but I think on the tabletop it's going to be fine. And again, these figures are two parts. The whole rider, including the legs, you glue onto the horse. The shield, part of the rider. If you remember my last video, I talked about the Crusaders. The shield, you had to glue those onto the knights, and that was not fun. But these are a lot easier to assemble. Now, some of these figures, as you can see, this guy up here, this is from the Mounted Command, and I'll pull some of those other up. The Mounted Command has three basic kind of figures. They have this figure, which does not have a lance, but has kind of a standard flagpole, basically. And so I'm using him as a commander, and then there's also this guy holding a mace, and then there's also the drummer option as well. So I've mixed those in as well. There's some of my commanders here, but then I also have them mixed into my knights. After that, I wanted some light javelin. The Islamic armies were quite varied, but that is kind of everything that the TB line has in terms of cavalry. They have the knights, they have the horse archers, they have variants of the horse archers that are camelry, and they have the knight command. So I had to go outside of the TB line, and in Pendraken, one of the things that I did is, well, at first what I did is I ended up looking in the Magister Militum range. Again, they are unfortunately shutting down. And these are Mamluks. Now, I was only able to get one pack of them, which is 12, so I only have 3 bases of Mamluks. But I'm kind of using these as elite horse archers. You could see some of them. These all have lances and maces. In fact, all of mine have lances and maces because I believe the horse archer Mamluks were sold out. But I'm going to use these kind of somewhere in between the knights and the horse archers. So if Magister Militum opens up, you could use those. My critique of Magister Militum, although the sculpts are fine, the horses are a little static, whereas the Pendragon horses are very, they have a lot of movement, and they are a little chunkier. But I don't think, you put these on the tabletop, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. After that, I went and I looked, like I mentioned, in the 16th century Ottoman Turks. Now, these guys with the shields, and you can see they're a little taller than these other guys. I'll talk about why. I'm like, oh, those look fairly generic. They have a javelin, they have a shield. Those are from the 16th century Ottoman Turks, and I believe those are called, and I cannot remember what they're called. They're in there somewhere. You certainly could use them, but then I, after the fact, realized that where I should have looked is in the ancients area, in the Achaemenid Persians. And I bought some more, and these are Achaemenid Persian Arab cavalry, and honestly, they just kind of look like generic mounted light cavalry with javelins, and some of them are command figures mixed in there with horns, and one of them is holding a sword aloft. In fact, I have that guy here as kind of a command unit, and they work perfect as that kind of desertish looking, head wrap light cavalry. So those work fine. They're not from the TP range, but they are still Pendragon. Now, some other figures that I have after all that, which is why I have so many of them, is a friend of mine actually got me these for my birthday, and these are from Old Glory 10 millimeter, and these are their Turkish horse archers. So I will be using these as more elite horse archers, and these are specifically going to be Turkish horse archers. And these are, of the 3 manufacturers that I have, Pendragon, Magister Militum, and Old Glory. These are my least favorite because, well, they just kind of look a little derpy, to be perfectly honest. They work, and again, once you get them on the tabletop, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at them with magnifying glasses on a camera, but I just don't think they hold a candle to the amazing sculpts, specifically from the TB line, but even the non-TB line sculpts, which are a little closer in scale, have a lot more detail and a lot more movement. These are just kind of, they're just kind of fine. So I have them. They're going to be extra horse archers. I'm going to use them as Turkish horse archers. And that is it for the cavalry contingent of the Crusaders. The rest of the figures all come from the TB range, with one exception. While I was at Magister Militum, I grabbed these generic Arab infantry so that I would have some variety of Arab infantry. And in fact, I'm going to use these as kind of garrison levy troops, whereas the rest of my Arab infantry come from the TB line, and these are called the infantry with sword and spear. And you can see, compared to the heavy Crusader infantry, these definitely do not have as much armor, really any armor at all. They all have shields. They are all kind of very two-dimensional. As a good comparison, you often, because these come from a 2-part mold, the figure is going to be sculpted with, down the middle. You can see these figures, the 2 halves were front and back. These figures, the 2 halves were left and right. So they just have a bit of a different profile. Like, these are all actively running forward, while these are all standing. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And there's nothing wrong with them. They're perfectly fine. I think they look pretty good. There also are, you have some options for some dismounted Mamluks, the dismounted riders, rather elite. They didn't dismount very often, but when they did, they were some of the most powerful foot infantry that the Saracens had, because the Saracens really were a cavalry-based army. And again, you can see these were almost like at a 30-degree angle. So they all kind of have this sideways gait. And their shields are all back, which is a little awkward. There's this one guy who's a little further, but they're not my favorite sculpts, but they do the job, and they're not going to be in it too much. And then finally, you have some foot archers. These are very similar to the Crusader foot archers. Obviously, some of the details are different. They have different helmets and caps, and they're all aiming forward. And I think these are actually some of my favorite of the TB foot sculpts. Lots of little details. I can even see that I actually didn't even paint some of these things that are on the shirt that are actually either braids or part of the hat, just for, well, honestly, probably for time. And then finally, some crossbowmen. The Saracens didn't use a lot of crossbows. They did have some, and they have shields on the back. So overall, I would actually, the Crusader figures are easier to paint. They're faster to paint. They have a lot less detail, just because the nature of the army is less detailed than the Islamic Saracen figures. But compared to the Magister Militum figures, which I think are solid, and the Old Glory figures, which are not my favorite, but they get the job done. Once again, Pendraken, the TB line, and in general, absolutely fantastic. And with the two-piece figures, something I'm not usually used to with 10 millimeter, much easier to glue together than some of the knights from the Crusader line, and even the two-part knights here, again, relatively easy to glue the body of the rider to the horse. Although sometimes there's going to be a little gap between the saddle and the horse. You can see in this left side figure, but once they're all mounted up on the table, you're not really going to see that. It is one minor flaw in a relative ocean of positives. So if you want to see this or the Crusader Army, Historicon in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, 2024, the Battle of Acre. And hopefully I'll also get a video of that battle up on YouTube at some point, as well as the Battle of Hattin prior to that, where Guy de Lusignan loses to Saladin, and then Jerusalem is conquered prior to the Third Crusade. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments down below. As always, thank you very much for watching, and this is Chris from Felgar Productions signing off.